Today we gonna have some fun, baby. I like to call this one the beginner series, and we gonna have some fun with a camera, and we gonna explain what's going on. Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Sinclair, and welcome back to my channel. Morning, afternoon, evening, you know the deal by now. Hopefully we're like maybe 8 episodes in, who knows. Today I'm gonna be explaining all the basics of a camera and what it does. So this is for the beginners. You advanced people can learn something as well, but this one is definitely for the beginners. Stay tuned. Hello, welcome back. I'm currently holding the Fujifilm X Pro 1. Looks very old school, love it, very heavy. But the reason we have this today is to teach you about cameras. So let's not delay, let's get straight into it. So the first thing I'd like to introduce you to is the aperture, which is a ring on this camera. So when you think about an aperture of a camera, the easiest way to think about it is your eye. So for example, when you go into a dark room, your iris, which is the black thing in your eyes, like sorry the science people, it will open up wide. The reason it does that is to let light in. So it's exactly the same as a camera. If you're in a dark room, you'd want to have your iris open. That allows more light. But if you had it closed, your image would be very dark. And it's not to say you can't get an image, but you would have to then introduce something like lighting or introduce something else to try and get that compensated for. So the aperture is very important. So on cameras, you would normally see some markings that will say like 1.8, 2.8, 1.2. That is actually the widest that the aperture can open. So on this camera, not that you can see, f2, which is the way we measure aperture, would be the lowest that it opens up to. So it opens up to aperture 2, so it can let quite a bit of light in. But the aperture also does something else with the camera. When you have your aperture wide open, you'll see that the background has gotten blurry. So if you look at my set right now, you can see I'm in focus. Let me go out. Then you see that that's gone in focus. And then if I come back, you see that I'm now in focus. The reason that is happening is because I have my camera set to an aperture of 2.8, which we will call a shallow depth of field. So imagine we have pieces of paper. One piece of paper's here and one piece of paper's here. When you concentrate on this one, but blur out the other one, you have now created a shallow depth of field, which can be used creatively to make films and all that other stuff. If you watch a movie, you'll start to notice that sometimes things are blurry, sometimes things are sharp. It's just a creative thing, and that's just how cameras work. Don't know the science behind it. But say if you was on the other side, or you wanted to take a picture, or you wanted to make a video, and you needed everything to be in focus, you would then move to the other side of the aperture, which on this camera is f16, and that will make sure you have a wide depth of field. That then means that everything is gonna be more so in focus. You're not gonna have that isolation that you would have from having a shallow depth of field or a lower depth of field by having like an f-stop of like 1.2. The reason this is important is because when you become a photographer or a video person and you wanna step out from using the automatic function, I implore you to do that straight away. It allows you to create things the way you want it. You can go out and say, I want this to be the focus of my image. And you can then dial in like f2.8, and then you know that your image is going to be a shallow depth of field image. Whereas if you go to a mountain, you don't want it to be shallow. You want the whole thing to be sharp and clear and crispy. So you might go to f22 if your lens allows, and then that will allow you to get a very sharp image. So that is your aperture. So the second point in cameras I would like to touch on is shutter speed, which is represented by this dial on the Fuji X Pro 1. So the easiest way I can explain shutter speed is to think of an elevator. That sounds crazy, I know, but let me explain. On this camera, I have shutter speeds of 30, 60, 120, straight up to 4,000. So how does this relate to an elevator? Imagine you have an elevator comes down, ping, doors open, doors close, it goes down. So let's think of it this way. If we remove those doors and the elevator just went straight down, that is what a shutter speed is. It's basically how fast the camera is taking an image. I hope you're following me here. I really do hope. So for an extreme example, if you was at Formula 1 and you wanted to get a really sharp picture of a car, you would need a fast shutter speed. The reason I say that, if we go back to the analogy of the lift, for you to capture a car going fast, the camera needs to take a picture really fast. So if we were to say, take a picture at 1,000th of a second, and that's the degree that we talk about shutter speed, it'd be 1/10, 1/50th, 1,000th ECT. If you have a car driving fast, your camera needs to be able to take that picture just as fast. So if you had a shutter speed of say 1/500th of a second, the car's going past and it's zoom, When it goes past here, if you have a fast shutter speed, the elevator is just gonna go. So I really do hope you get what I mean when I say this. So that is basically capturing the car as it goes past. So for another example, if you was to have that same car and your shutter speed was 1/50th of a second, the car will go and the elevator will go. So by the time that the car has gone past, the elevator has taken its time to go past and it's actually missed it. But it may not miss it. What it may do is you may get a blurry image because it's capturing some of the car going forward, but it's not going fast enough to capture it all crystal clear. So just to recap, a shutter speed is how fast the camera is taking an image. And if you use that premises, it makes a lot of sense. Maybe a little bit more than my elevator analogy. Let me know if it worked, please. I had to really think about this one. But on the other side of the spectrum, if you want to have an image where you have movement and you had someone standing in the middle not moving and you had people walking across, in that particular image, if we say we had a shutter speed of 1/10 of a second or even 1/5 of a second, then the motion created by the people moving will leave trails and the person that is standing still will be sharp. So that is the shutter speed. And on to the most fun, but not fun one of them all, is the ISO, which stands for Image Sensitivity of Light, which I'm gonna check because I don't even know if that's right. This one's an interesting one because this dictates how bright your image is. So if we think of ISO, the easiest way to think of it, which is not an elevator, is the sun. So when I say this, the ISO is basically how bright the sun is gonna be. This is important because if you're in a dark room, you need a lot of light. But the only problem is the more light you introduce or the higher your ISO number is, the more noise you will introduce to your image. And when I say noise, I mean when you look at an image and it looks really grainy and there's little bits jumping around, doing a Macarena. But on the other side, if you have a situation where you're taking a picture or a video and you have a really low ISO, like ISO 100s, your image will come out nice and clean because it's sufficiently lit, it's bright, and the camera can see what it needs to see, so it doesn't have to struggle. But this is why you end up paying a lot for certain cameras, because if the camera can go to a high ISO and still be clean, that's something that's desired. But you can get a really clean image as long as you have bright light or a sun outside. So in regards to the ISO again, a low ISO is always better than a high ISO, but sometimes you have to use what's available. So if you're in a situation where it's dark, you have to use a high ISO. It wouldn't be a smart idea to use a low ISO in a dark situation and then expect it to be bright later on, because if the sun's not out, it's gonna be dark outside. So think of that in the same way when you're using your ISO on your camera. And yeah, that is the basics of a camera, guys. Hopefully that wasn't confusing. I tried to make it as simple as possible. Just to round up quickly, the aperture is your eye. The lower the number is, the wider the aperture is. Also, when you have a wide aperture, you increase your depth of field. When you have a low aperture, you make your depth of field wide. Shutter speed is your elevator, how fast it's going. If you have a slow elevator, you can introduce motion blur into your image. If you have a fast elevator, you can slow down fast motion. If you have a waterfall and you take a picture at 1,000th of a second, you'll be able to slow down that water completely and it won't be blurry. And then the last one, once again, is ISO, and that is your sunshine. How bright is the sun gonna be in your image? Not a literal sun, but how bright your image is gonna be. If it's darkness, you wanna have a bright sun. If it's bright outside, you don't really wanna have a bright sun, if that makes sense. But thank you once again. That has been my latest video. Hopefully you've learned something if you're a beginner or an intermediate person. I hope. If you do like my channel, do make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because I'm just giving you information at this point, and knowledge is power, so why not? But yeah, thank you so much. My name is Sinclair, and I'll see you in the next one.